Well, good morning, everyone. I have these in, so I can't hear whether you said it or not, so I'm going to let it pass. We're so glad you're here. Happy Mother's Day to those of you who are mothers. We're obviously so thankful for you, because without you, we wouldn't be here. None of us would be. But it's your day today, and we're just glad that we're able to celebrate that with you. Welcome to Newbridge. My name is Michael Hottie. I'm one of the pastors here at Newbridge. And we have a couple big weddings going on, so that means that it is basically you get to deal with me today. So if you're not a Michael Hottie fan, this is not going to be a great day for you. But we'll see what God does, and I'm really excited to be able to worship with you today and be able to just bring a message that I think will be a really encouraging and hopeful for us as we live out our faith and we live out our lives in this world. Would you stand with me? We're going to sing together. We're going to worship together. One of the great things about being in this big open space that is so old and has seen so much is that it's just a great place to sing and to let it loose and to give ourselves to God as we worship. So let's do that together this morning. Cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. Body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still and all alone. Praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise. Oh Lord our God. And on break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trample death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ the King. Shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' Sharing with the worship team up here this morning as we came early and we're getting ready that, I think one of the things that many of us struggle with, if we're truly honest, and one of the things I love about Newbridge and about this place is it's a place where we can bring all of ourselves before God, and it's okay. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to have doubts and fears and concerns. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to have a day where it doesn't seem like it's all together and where we understand and where everything is just kind of going up and to the right, and our lives don't feel maybe the way that we ought to want them to feel. Many years ago, I've started out as a worship leader. Some of you know that. And I had a mentor, and he said something to me. He said, one of the unique things when we worship God, when we worship here, and the truth is, really, without making a sermon out of this, we all worship something at all times, even if you don't believe in God at all, even if you have a million questions. There's something that rules you. There's something that you answer to. There's something that kind of dictates the direction that your life goes in, and that can be a person, that can be a thing, it can be any number of things. But when we worship God, it's the one place where we don't just have to bring our best. Every other God, you bring your best to. You bring the best stuff. You bring your best face. You put your best foot forward. But this is a place, and this is a God where you can bring your all. You can bring your doubts, and maybe that's all you've got today is doubts. And you can bring that, and you can lay that down as an act of worship. We see that in the Bible over and over again. You can bring your fears. Maybe some of you, you're just on fire, and I know there's a few people here who are totally on fire for God, and that's so great. You bring all that. But maybe you just have a little bit, you're like, it was just everything that it took for me to get out of bed here and come and just muster up enough faith and optimism that this would be worth being in this room and sharing these moments together. And you just bring that little bit. And the truth we discover about God is whether it's a little, whether it's a lot. All he wants is he doesn't want our quantity, he wants our totality. He's not interested in our quantity, whether we have a lot or a little. He's interested in what we have. Maybe all you have is a little today. And I would just encourage you, maybe your act of worship is just to lay that down, whatever that thing is, that question is, that doubt is, that thing you're so excited about, and just say, I'm going to offer this to God as my act of worship. And the thing I love about this next song is it really just speaks about that. It speaks about the fact that some of us, we feel powerless and we feel poor and we feel like we don't have a lot. But that's not the point. Because it's about who God is. It's not about what we bring. It's about the fact that we bring it and we lay it down before God.
All the poor and powerless, all the lost and lonely, and all the thieves will come confess and know that you are holy, and know that you are holy, and all will sing out hallelujah, and we will cry out hallelujah. Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses that He is God. Sing that with me. Shout it. Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses that He is God. Shout it. Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses. He is God. Shout it. Shout it. Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses. He is God, yeah. And we will sing out hallelujah, and we will cry out hallelujah, and we will sing out Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses. He is God. Shout it. Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses. He is God. Shout it.
Come on, lift it up.
Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses. He is God. Shout. Go on and scream it from the mountains. Go on and tell it to the masses. He is God. worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. Eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. And I will put my trust. It's a firm foundation. And I will put my trust in you alone. And
come here in these moments on this day, there's so many things that we can build our lives around, and so many things we have built our lives around. I pray in this moment, as we bring ourselves at our highest highs and some of us close to our lowest lows and at all points in between, as we bring our confident faith, our joy and our strength, as we bring our struggles and our weakness and our doubts and our questions and even our fears, we lay them before you, that we would take that risk just in a moment, because it's a risk. Take that step of faith to build a portion of our lives around you that maybe has never been built around you before. We thank you that we can gather here in this place on this day. We thank you that you are in our midst, even as you've promised to be. Now we ask that you would speak to us, that you'd work in our hearts, and you'd flow out of our lives. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. You can go ahead and have a seat. See, what I have to do here is I have to remember to take the right wires off and put the right wires on. We do that. Ta-da! There we go. Hey, well, welcome again, everybody. We're so glad you're here, and thank you for coming and worshiping and just being with us. We have some old friends today who are here. We have some guests who are here. We're just really glad that for whatever reason you came, you know, maybe you are your mother's son, your mother's daughter, and they basically dragged you to church today because that was part of the deal, because it's Mother's Day, and they're like, would you go to church with me? You're like, fine, I guess I will, as long as we can go to brunch afterwards. We're glad you're here, too. We're glad that you came, and we're just so thankful, really, to be able to celebrate what God is doing here in our midst, what he's doing in our hearts, and just all of the different ways that looks. If you are our guest today, and guest means this is your first time, or maybe you've been coming a couple weeks, and you've now decided that you can be officially a guest, we have a gift for you back here at our Welcome Center, which is the table in the back of the room to my left and your right. We have a gift bag we'd love to give you, just with a couple little gifts in it, and some more information about our church. There are some Connect cards that are available there as well. If you'd like to make your presence known, we'd love for you to do that in whatever level of information is comfortable for you. We will not spam you. People in suits will not come to your door. It's nothing like that. There's nothing to worry about. But if there's any way we can serve you, we would love to do that. And we're just glad you're here this morning. We have a couple things coming up in the life of our church. The first one is this. About once a month we do after church lunches. And it really accomplishes a couple things. It's a way to get free food, and it's also a way for us to get to know each other a little better. One of the unique things about Newbridge is that people come to Newbridge from all over the place. Like if I were to show you the circumference, the radius that, you know, the people come from, it's a big amount of area. And so we don't necessarily cross paths during the week in our schools or in our towns. And so these lunches are a way for us to just kind of cross some of those lines and get to know each other. That is next Sunday, May the 20th. That's over in the Commons. That's that building that we used to meet in, that you passed on your way, and that Newbridge Kids is currently meeting in. You know it's the Commons because it has a sign on the front that says the Commons. I always make the same joke. It's basically the same joke. I make it all the time. It's some variation of that. So it's not here, it's over there. But the way that these work, and the way they get amazing is when you bring food and you share your best with us. We have never really had a shortage of food, but it still requires you to sign up and to bring the food. So there's a sign-up sheet on our information center, which is the table over here by the doors that you came in. We would love for you to sign up and just bring something. There's a lot of different ways that can be, and we have an amazing time, and we eat way too much, and it's just a great, great time. So if you'd like to come, please come. If you'd like to bring food, we would love for you to do that. We always are in need of people who want to do that, so you can sign up on the information center. You can also sign up online on our website at newbridgenj.com. The second thing we're doing is this, and a couple times a year we do this project. We partner with an organization called Young Lives. And what Young Lives is, some of you are familiar with the student organization called Young Life. Young Lives is an offshoot of that, And what they do is it's a ministry to teenage moms who are in the school systems in some of the towns that just surround us and are very, very close to us. And you have mothers who have babies who are pregnant and who are trying to go to school and trying to raise a child, and very often the father is not in the picture, so you can imagine just how much of a challenge that is, especially on a day like today, Mother's Day, where there's this mixture of joy and struggle. And we've been partnering with them. It's an amazing organization that connects them together, that serves them tangibly, that gives them hope, that gives them a spiritual foundation, and really gives them a place where they are known, where they are recognized, where they are important, and where they are welcome. And one of the ways that we partner with them, and it seems like such a small thing, but it makes a big difference, is there are these envelope box things that we do about twice a year called changelopes. I always imagine that a changelope is like a mythical animal. Like it's like there should be a cartoon about it, and it's one of those obscure things. Like 2 people thought that was funny. See, we're getting there. It's just going to take a little bit of time. But there's a display in the back on the information center, and what they are is they're just like a thing that you unfold and you fill with your change. And if you're anything like me, you have a drawer full of this stuff somewhere. And so some of you, by the way, paper fits in there too. You can write checks, you can throw bills in, you can do whatever. Newbridge Church, for not being a super large church, has a reputation for being very generous when it comes to this. So if you have extra change, this is a great thing to do with your kids. If you have kids, fill that thing up. We have to bring them back on Sunday, June the 3rd, so you have about a month to deal with this. But grab one, take it, fill it up, and make sure you bring it back here any Sunday between now and the 3rd, full, and we will be able to bless the Young Lives organization and the ministries that they do so well. We'd love for you to do that. You've got a bulletin on the way in. There's more information about all the things that we do here at church, and we would love for you to do that. The bathrooms are over here. I feel like I'm doing the airplane thing now. If you have a young baby and they melt down, you can go over there. This is the walk of shame, kind of a life hack if you want, is you can go out those exits and walk outside and come in this exit, and no one will see you and ask you how the bathroom was. So Pastor Tim, when he's here, he does that a lot, and I always call him out on it because it's just kind of a thing. And finally, we don't pass an offering plate here at Newbridge. There's a donation box in the back, and really we are thankful for those of you who've been called to support this church and who literally make it possible, and we're thankful for you. But if you feel inclined in any way to support the ministry of Newbridge, you can do that in the back, or you can also give online on our website at newbridgenj.com. So today is Mother's Day, and some of you, you are a mom, and you just look over your kids and you celebrate everything that life is, and you know we are able, and we're thankful to be able to celebrate so many women in our world, and especially in our church. You know, it's a day where we celebrate with joy, and we acknowledge the debt of gratitude that we all have for our mothers. But the thing that I also am very aware of is at the same time it carries with it so many different emotions and experiences. And for some of you today, this is actually a really difficult day, you know, because maybe this is the year that you lost your mom. This is the first year that she's no longer there, and there's an empty chair at that table, or there's a tradition that you celebrated together that now you're left alone, and you're just reminded of the void that you feel. You know, maybe you're a mother and you lost a child this year. Maybe you lost a child, or you had a miscarriage, and all the mothers around you and all the flowers and the celebration, it just reminds you of that empty space, that pain that you feel. You know, you might be a woman this morning, you know, and you're trying to have a baby, and you haven't been successful, and it's just a really difficult reminder of that. And maybe some of you today, you're single, and you're waiting to meet the right person, and it just doesn't feel like it's going to happen, and it's difficult, and you want to move on to that phase of your life, but it just doesn't seem like it's happening, and it just reinforces your struggle and your pain. This is a complicated day, and I want to acknowledge publicly for all of you the wide range of emotions that we feel on a day like this. But whoever you are, and whatever circumstances you find yourself in, I want to affirm a couple things for you. First of all, whether you have children or not, you're called to be a spiritual mother. You're called to raise people up in the kingdom of God. And the second thing, I really just want to affirm this as much as I can. Your identity is not determined by those other circumstances. Your identity is not determined by whether you're a biological mother or not, whether this is a great day or whether it's not. Your identity is based in the truth that you were loved unconditionally by God. And that's where your identity is found. And so for some of you today, we celebrate. For some of you, we mourn. And we acknowledge the fact that in this wide range of things, this day that's a great day and maybe it's a difficult day, all at the same time. You know, when I think about Mother's Day, I think about the fact that I'm married to an amazing woman and I have an amazing little boy. I also think about the fact that I lost my mother many years ago and that I don't get to celebrate it with her. And so it's really a complex day. And we just acknowledge that God gives grace, that he gives hope, that he gives healing and comfort, and he even gives joy in the midst of all of those things. When I was a kid, and I always tell stories about when I was a kid, and I've told you guys that when I run out of stories, I'm just going to hang it up, and that's going to be it. I have been water skiing precisely once in my life. How many of you love to water ski? Oh, this is going to be a great crowd. This is going to be super, super good. So none of you love water skiing, so we're in this together. I wanted to try it. You know, it's like you see Baywatch and you see all these things on TV, and it's like, wow, that looks super great. And so I had this friend who had a boat, and I grew up in upstate New York, and we're over in the Adirondacks. And if you've ever been over the Adirondacks, it's like a mountain range, and it's a big park, and it's just gorgeous. This time of year especially, it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And there's this lake there called the Great Sacandaga Reservoir. And it was just like one of these idyllic days. It's one of those days that even though it's been so many years ago, I think back and I remember that day. It was absolutely beautiful conditions, scenery. The water was warm, it was clear. We went swimming. You know, I was jumping off this tree branch like 20 feet above the water into the water. And we decided, me and this guy I was with, we decided he had a ski boat, which is basically, it's a small boat with a giant motor. And this thing you hook onto, we decided we were going to go skiing. And I'd never been, but I had been like cross-country skiing, so I'm like, how hard can it be? So I got these skis and hooked up behind the boat, and he started the thing up. And basically about the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, so many times, you know, you see the guys, they're like this, and they're like doing all the things. Really what the reality is you bounce along like a rock on your face. So it's like I was faced, you know, I had water under my eyelids. I had, you know, just water in places it's never been before. And I was like, and he'd stop and we'd do it again. And I'd try to get up on the skis and the same thing would happen. My legs would fly out from under me. And it just went over and over. And finally, I got up onto the skis for like 10 seconds. And it was just like, it was like victory. And then the same thing happened. And I would love to tell you that the end of the story is that I just like, I triumphed over water skiing, but I did not. 10 seconds is the longest I've ever been up on water skis, and that was 20-some years ago. And that was it. And you know what? As I was thinking of this story, you know, I think about kind of the reality that we find ourselves in life. And you know, the reality is, just like in that story, in the midst of this beautiful place, there was a battle. In the midst of these beautiful circumstances, these beautiful surroundings, this idyllic setting, there was a fight, there was a struggle, and I was not winning that struggle. And as I thought about today, especially it being Mother's Day, but just in general, the things that we feel like in life, I think that's what our lives feel like. What our lives look like so often is that there's beauty, but right in the middle of beauty, right in the middle of all these good things, I mean, we see all the trees blooming and the flowers coming out, right in the middle of beauty, there's struggle. So struggle's not like this war zone where there's explosions and things like that. For some people in the world, that is true. But for most of us, there's a strange mixture of a beautiful, idyllic setting, and in the middle of it is struggle. And I think the thing that gets us so often, and I know this is true for moms, and I know this is especially true for women in our culture. Believe you me, it seems totally ironic that I would stand up here on Mother's Day and talk about this, because I'm not a mother, I'm not a woman. I do not understand the struggle that all of you go through on a daily basis in so many ways. I watch my own wife and I see a fraction of it, but I know that's only a little bit of it. The problem that I think we run into is that when we struggle as people, we feel like there's something wrong. When we struggle as parents, we feel like something is wrong, and you know, we're doing something wrong, or we're not doing enough, or we're not doing it in the right way. When we struggle in our marriage, when we have a season, and maybe it's a day, or it's a big fight, or maybe it's a month, or maybe it's a year, or maybe it's been like 10 years.
and it just feels like struggle. And we remember back distantly to that beautiful day where everything was idyllic, and it just seems like it's such a long distance away from that. It's so far away from that. We look at ourselves and we begin to say, I must be doing something wrong. There must be something wrong here. And you know, we live in a social media culture. Most of us are on Facebook or on Instagram, or we know about it, or we have the internet. And it doesn't help when we see these perfect pictures of people in their situations, and we look at our own life, we look at our own family, we look at our own marriage, we look at our own job, and they don't look anything like that. You know, I have some Instagram friends, I'm not going to call out any names, but, you know, they have the perfect spiritual life. You know, they have the perfectly framed shot. They're up at 4 in the morning, and they have their Bible, and it's like on a piece of reclaimed wood. And there's some kind of coffee, and it's not like, oh, you know, I made instant coffee. It's like some kind of thing that looks like, I don't even know what it looks like, but they made it in some kind of apparatus, and it's like super fancy, and they did the little, like the latte art thing on the top, and it's just like this perfect idyllic thing. And you know, I look at those people, I'm like, I'm a pastor. I work in the church, I'm like, I've got nothing. I can't compare to that. That's not how my life feels so often. You know, you see that people with their perfect kids and what looks like their perfect family. I have this one Facebook friend who shall remain nameless, who has been in a relationship for 9 months, and he is now giving out relationship advice to everybody. How many of you know, can I get an amen? How many of you know somebody like that? Yeah, we all know somebody. I'm like, you know, I've been married 18 years, so I'm like, just you wait. You know, I shouldn't feel that, but I do feel that because that's the reality is we look at our own lives and they don't look anything like that. And you know what's true is 1 week from today, my wife Grace and I will have been married for 18 years. We've been through 18 years, and for some of you that seems like a long time, and for some of you that seems like a short time. I love my wife, and I love my family absolutely dearly. I see my wife with more beauty and more affection and more depth than I ever have before. We've been through a lot together. We have this handsome, smart, energetic, strong-willed little boy, and there's a lot of beauty. But if I'm honest, it's a battle sometimes. The thing they don't tell you about marriage, about parenting, about life with Jesus, is it's a battle. And some of you feel that battle today. Do you know what that battle makes you? It makes you absolutely normal. The battle, the struggle that you feel, wherever it is in your life, makes you absolutely normal. You know, our culture, it's obsessed with winning, right? It's all about winning. And the thing I just want to encourage you with briefly today, on this day, is that in a culture that's about winning, sometimes the thing that matters the most is that you just stay in the fight. You just stay in the battle. Just like me in that water skiing thing, you get up and you go again. And I think on our bad days, you know, we're challenged with two lies that we're tempted to believe. That either our fight doesn't matter, or that we can't stay in it. We just don't have the strength. We don't have the courage. We don't have the emotional depth. We don't have the resources. We don't have the wisdom. We just can't do it anymore. And I want to speak to both of those things. They're lies because the thing that gets us is we don't feel like we're winning, and therefore, as I said, we feel like we're doing something wrong. And so what I want to encourage you today with is simply this. We always need people to encourage us, whether you think you do or not, you do. Stay in the fight, whatever your fight is, because it's a good fight. Because you matter. Because it matters. Stay in the fight. This morning, I want to look briefly at this very familiar story. Even if you're not a church person or a Christian person, you've probably heard about it. It's in the Gospel of Matthew. And it deals with one of the major characters in that book named Peter, who went on to become this really kind of big deal in the church. He was one of the early followers of Jesus. He was a fisherman. He was kind of this impetuous guy. And it's the story where we discover Peter and all the disciples in the boat. And Jesus comes to them. And he does one of those miraculous things that we sing about and we hear about in Sunday school and kids ministry. He walks on water. It begins in verse 22 of chapter 14.
And it goes like this. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up onto a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. So a storm is kind of coming up. Jesus is nowhere to be found. He did this a lot. He just kind of like wandered off, and people were like, where's Jesus? We don't know where Jesus is. And so they kind of went on with their thing, and the storm starts to come out. And then this crazy thing happens. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. How many of you have ever seen anyone walk on a lake? 0 people have seen anyone walk on a lake, so this is like a crazy thing. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified, as would you be terrified. Even if it looked like Jesus, you'd be like, this is nuts. What's going on here? It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. You know, this is where we find ourselves so often. Whether it's in our spiritual walk with God, whether it's in our marriage or relationships, whether it's any of the struggles that we talked about earlier. You know, we have this moment where we're like, I have decided to follow Jesus. I'm dancing, by the way. Have you decided to follow? And it's like this big deal. It's like you have this big moment. You're like, this is going to be it. You got married and you went down the aisle and like everyone was like, ah! You know, you had that moment in the hospital room where this little baby cried out for the first time, and it was just joyful, incredible moment. And we feel like that's like the culmination. That's like the success. That's when the credits are supposed to roll. But you know what? That's the beginning and not the end. We buy into this idea that following Jesus into the places that he calls us to is the end of the fight. It's the beginning of the fight. So Jesus says, come. We're like, you called me out upon the water. You know, and you come out, and then suddenly the storm comes up, and the waves come up, and things get harder, and they make less sense. And it feels like Jesus tricked us. But really, there's something that we learn in the middle of the story. When we walk into those moments, that's not the end of the fight. That's not the end of the battle. That's the beginning. The passage goes on. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. You know, I think Peter gets an incredibly bad rap in this story. You know, if you've ever read this and you were in Sunday school, people are like, don't be like Peter, you should have more faith. You should just like, over you go to Jesus. And nobody does that. That's not how it works. I want to give you permission to struggle on the waves this morning of your life and of your fight and of your battle. Because that's the reality. But I also want to encourage you with some things I think we see in this passage. The first one is this. If you're in the fight this morning, Jesus looks with favor on you. If you're in the fight, if you don't know if you're going to be married this time next year, but you're still fighting, Jesus looks with favor on you. If you have a kid who's going this way and you want him to go this way and every day is just like a war, Jesus looks with favor on you. If you didn't even know if you wanted to get out of bed today, but you did, and you've got nothing to offer, you've got no strength, you have very little hope, you have a million questions, but you got out and you're in the fight, Jesus looks with favor on you. He's not like, oh, that one's really got to get it together. Look at all these people who have it together. He's looking with favor on you because you got out of the boat this morning. The thing I think we miss in this passage so often is when we look at Peter, there were at least 11 other guys who stayed in the boat. They stayed where it was safe. They stayed where it was easy. They stayed where it made sense. And you know what? You'll never find Jesus in the boat. You will always find Jesus out on the waves. Jesus is never hanging out in the boat where it's safe. He's never hanging out where it's easy. He's never hanging out where everything makes sense. He's always out in the storm. And so if you climbed out of the boat, and even if you feel like you're sinking today, Jesus
He looks with favor on you. The second thing is this: Jesus is with you in the fight. I know one of the biggest struggles that many of us have when we encounter difficult seasons in our life is we feel like we're absolutely alone. We feel like we're the only one who has the thing that we struggle with. We feel like we're the only one who knows. We feel like no one cares. But the reality is Jesus is right there with us in the fight. One of the things I think is so interesting about this passage is that when the storms come up, ghosts appear. When the storms come up, Jesus comes walking out on the water, and apparently he dressed like Jesus and looked like Jesus, but they didn't recognize he was Jesus, yet it was kind of a crazy thing. But ghosts appear. You know, when I was a kid, I lived in this Victorian house, and some of you follow me on Facebook. I was up there a month or so ago, and I took some pictures of it, and at least a couple of you said, that looks haunted. And you know what? It felt like it was at times. And I was like this little kid, and I slept in this room, and we had this big open closet that didn't have a door. And during the day, it was great. My toys were in there, my clothes were in there. But at night, it was like a whole different story. I remember being this little kid and looking at that space and being like, there's got to be something in there that's going to come out. And many of you experience that as well. When the circumstances around us change, when the environment changes, when the light changes, ghosts come out of everywhere, whether they're true, whether they're real, or whether they're not. But Jesus does this thing in the middle of that when everyone's like, oh, and then things are going nuts. In verse 27, he says, take courage, which means that courage isn't something that you have. It's something that you have to seize. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Take courage. It is I. It's not a ghost. It's Jesus. Don't be afraid. Those words, don't be afraid, appear hundreds of times in the Bible. Because one of the things we learn is that a common reaction to walking a life that's on the waves, that's in the storm, that's in the fight, is fear. There's nothing wrong with fear. We all experience fear. The thing that matters is what we do with our fear. And Jesus is saying, seize courage, grab onto it, go get it, hold on to it, because you're going to need it. But I'm with you in the storm. And finally this, if you stay in the fight today, whatever your fight is, God is the one writing your victory story. If you stay in the fight, God is the one who's writing your victory story. You don't have to write the story. God is the one who's writing the story of victory. But here's the thing, is it's going to take longer than you think it's going to look, and it's going to look different than you ever expected. Jesus says this thing in verse 31. When he reaches down and he grabs Peter's hand and he pulls him up and he pulls him back onto his feet, he says, why did you doubt? And we look at that and say, well, Peter just didn't have enough faith, and he should have had more faith, and we should all have more faith than Peter did. What Jesus is saying is, why did you doubt that in the middle of the storm, I wouldn't be there with you? Why did you doubt that when the waves got high and things got loud and they got kind of crazy, that you were all alone? Why did you doubt that? I'm the one who's here to grab you and to pull you back to your feet and say, don't be afraid, take courage. It is I. You know, the thing that's amazing about this story about Peter is it's a really long story. We see him from the very beginning of his life in the Bible all the way to the end of his life. And I'd love to say after this story that, you know, Peter learned his lesson and he was just this hero giant of the faith and he went on to do things. He failed again and again and again and again and again. And you know what? Jesus came to him again and again and again and again and again. And so this morning, folks, it doesn't matter how much you feel like you've lost. It doesn't matter how much you feel like you've failed. It doesn't matter how many strikes are against you. It doesn't matter how many games back of the lead you feel like you are. Jesus comes to you again and again and again because he's writing a victory story. He just has a longer view of your story than you do. And in that, there's tremendous hope. Peter, despite all these failures, goes on to be the founder of what we now know as the church. You and I are here this morning because of this fisherman who is afraid, who failed again and again and again and again. Just imagine whatever your record is, whatever your doubts are, whatever your fears are, whatever your failures feel like they are, what kind of story could God write with your life if you just gave him the chance? There's this little verse. It's in one of the other letters that we find in the New Testament. It's this letter, many people believe Paul wrote it to a younger man named Timothy. And Paul was this guy who was one of the other leaders of the church, and he had been through a lot, and he's at the end of his life. He's an old guy. He's like writing to this younger man. He's in prison. It feels like everything has just fallen apart. There's nothing positive. And he's looking back over his life, and he's reflecting some of the things he's learned. And he says this in chapter 4 and verse 7 and 8. He says, I have fought a good fight. I've finished the course. I've kept the faith. The thing it doesn't say here is it doesn't say I fought and I won. I had a great record. It says I stayed in the fight. I got up and went again. I kept the faith. I didn't quit. Henceforth, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them that also love his appearing. Here's the thing I want you to get. So you don't have to strive to win the crown because Jesus has already won the victory. We sang about that earlier. He's won the victory over sin. He's won the victory over death. He's won the victory over failure. He gives us power for today, but he gives us hope that regardless of what happens in this life, whether it's short, whether it's long, whether it's easy, whether it's difficult, whether everything makes sense or whether nothing makes sense, that at the end of it all is Jesus and there is victory. And so it's not about how often you win. It's not about how often you lose. It's about the fact that you stay in the fight, whatever your fight is, because it matters and because you matter. And at the end of the day, at the end of the story, it's a story not of defeat, not of failure, but of hope and victory. Last week I wasn't here. And it's because I was in beautiful Hawaii, and no, the volcanoes were not near us, and we did not have to run from lava or anything, but we pray for the people who are going through that real struggle right now. So I was in this beautiful island paradise, and if you've ever been out there, you know that it is a long plane flight. It is like a 9-10 hour plane flight. And you know what I usually do when I go on these trips is I like to read, so I brought this huge stack of books. I put them. I'm not like I have a Kindle account, so I have like an iPad and an e-reader. I don't do that. I bring actual books. It makes everything weigh a lot. My wife loves when I do this, and so she had some business out there, and I went out and met her, and so I was on the plane by myself with all these books. And you know what I did? I didn't read any single one of them. I binged watched movies the entire time. I never do that, but I'm like, I've read enough books in my life. I'm going to binge watch some movies because it was like the free as many movies as you wanted kind of thing. And one of the movies that I've wanted to watch and I haven't had the chance because I'm kind of a history buff, is this movie called Dunkirk. A few of you have probably seen it, and it's a story. It's written by Christopher Nolan, or produced and directed by him. He's the one who did the Batman films, The Dark Knight, and all those. So it's this really well-done movie, and it's chronicling the events of the evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940. What had happened is Dunkirk is on the coast of France by the English Channel, right across the English Channel from England. And the German Nazi army had basically defeated the French, and they were pushing everybody literally into the sea. There was this pocket where all these French and British troops were crowded into their backs against the water, and it looked like the ultimate defeat. And Dunkirk is a story of the evacuation of the British Army. Destroyers and naval craft, but then a whole legion of regular civilian Englishmen in small boats and fishing boats and pleasure boats went across the channel and took a few guys, a lot of guys off, and some of the boats were sunk and they were bombed and they were torpedoed, and it was just this intense gut-wrenching ordeal. And it represented the most massive defeat of the British Army in recorded history. And so this movie is not a victory story. It's a story about a grave defeat, but about a miracle that the British Army escaped to fight another day. And right after the events of Dunkirk in 1940, Winston Churchill, who had just become the Prime Minister of England, he gave a speech. And he spoke these words in the aftermath of this disastrous defeat, with the German army looming just across the channel and England being the next in the crosshairs. He said this: even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We will fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to rescue and the liberation of the old. As Churchill made this speech, there was a lot of pressure to make peace with Hitler, to make peace with the Germans, to give up. And Churchill goes into this crucial moment in history, not as a great leader. Most saw him as anything but a great leader. He had a string of failures and folly behind him. But he goes into this moment and says, even if we lose again, even if we lose again, we are going to keep on fighting, because no one in 1940 would have been able to look 5 years ahead and say, we're ultimately going to win and it's all going to turn out fine, because it looked like disaster was just across the channel. But Churchill knew that all they needed to do was stay in the fight. And maybe this morning, on some small level or some large level, that feels like you. You look at your marriage and it looks like disaster is right across the channel. You look at your relationship with your kids and you're at your wit's end and you don't know what to do, and you feel like you don't have what you need to do it. You're looking at your financial situation. You're looking at your job. You're looking at your spiritual life and saying, this didn't turn out anything like I expected it to. I have decided to follow Jesus, and this is where it led me. This morning, I just want to challenge you. I want to encourage you. I want to exhort you. Blessed are those who stay in the fight. Blessed are you if you stay in the fight, even if you don't know how it's going to work out, even if you think it's not going to work out, even if you're down to your last ounce of strength, stay in the fight. Even if you feel like you've lost and you've lost again and you failed again and something has come to the end, Jesus extends his hand and he says to you, get up. Did you not think I would still be here with you? And so this morning, stay in the fight, whatever your fight is, because it's a good fight, because you matter, because it matters. Keep walking towards Jesus, because he's walking to you. He's reaching down his hand, and he's saying, get up, I'm here. Keep on going, for one day, the victor's crown will be yours. Let's pray. God, as I say these words, immediately my mind goes to people in this very room who are in the midst of such real fights. Fights of faith, fights of health, fights of finance, fights of marriage, parenting, of jobs, of trying to figure out what to do next, fights against addiction and struggle. And I pray today, God, you would just give them the courage, you'd give them the strength, you'd give all of us the strength to realize it's not about how often we fail or how much we feel like we've lost. It's about the fact that we get up, that we go again, and that we stay in the fight. Thank you that this is true, that you don't look at our win-loss record, you look at the fact that we're still climbing out of the boat on every single day and we're still standing. We're trying to go again. Thank you that you go with us. I pray that you would bring that home to people today in this room who need to hear it. Would you show up in their lives, in their hearts, and in their minds, and in their circumstances in a way that my words can't? But would you do that? Would we stand together in the fight? I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's sing. Let's sing almost as a song of defiance. A song that most of us know relatively well. Cornerstone.
Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less. Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong. Savior's love through the storm. He is Lord, Lord of all. The darkness seems to hide His face. I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. My anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless stand before the throne. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong. storm. He is Lord, Lord of all.
Sing those words again and make them our prayer.
Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all.
As you go today, I just want to remind you, if you're our guest today, we'd love for you to fill out a Connect card, but more importantly, we'd love for you to visit the Welcome Center in the back. We have a free gift for you, and we'd love to give that to you. Don't forget to grab your change envelope from the table in the back. Fill that with change. You can bring that back at the beginning of June. And just a reminder, parents, if you brought kids with you and you dropped them over at the Commons, you should leave with the same number of kids that you came with, and preferably the same kids. We would love for that to be the case. It's kind of a problem. We have to call the police and all that if you don't. So please pick up your kids right after church. And I just want to wish all of you moms a happy Mother's Day. We're so glad that you came and you spent this morning with us. And as you go, stay in the fight. Whatever your fight is, stay in it. You don't have to win. It doesn't matter how much you've lost. Stay in the fight. Because you matter. Because it matters. Because one day, the crown of victory will be yours. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.